Welcome everyone. It's really nice to see so many people here today. We're here to remember and celebrate Bert's life. We'll be hearing from his students and colleagues, Sean Kelly and Mark Raffel, and also from his children, Stefan and Gabrielle, and hearing some of his favorite music. Before we start, I've been asked by the family to ask you if you haven't already silenced your cell phones. Please do. I'm Jane Rubin. I first met Bert in the fall of 1972 when I was a senior at Berkeley and I was in his class, Backgrounds of Existentialism and Phenomenology. That class changed my life. I had been blessed with many good teachers up to that point in my life, but Bert was on a completely different level. He was devoted to understanding a philosophical text in a way that I had never experienced. He was willing to take as long as it took, days if necessary, to understand a sentence or a paragraph in Kierkegaard or Heidegger. And his whole demeanor when he was teaching conveyed the idea that this was an enterprise that really mattered. What was most striking to me was the humility of Bert's teaching. If he didn't understand something in Kierkegaard or Heidegger, he didn't assume that Kierkegaard and Heidegger were wrong. He assumed that they were smarter and deeper than he was, and that he just had to work harder to understand them. It was an almost religious devotion to the text that to me stood in very sharp contrast to the kind of dismissive attitude I had experienced from so many other teachers who seemed more interested in demonstrating their own brilliance than to really understand the philosopher they were teaching. That, more than the content of the philosophy itself, made me feel that the questions Bert encouraged us to ask weren't simply academic questions. They mattered. The stakes were huge. The stakes were how you were going to live your life. As my friend Susan Pollock, who's here somewhere, said when we were taking Bert's Heidegger class in 1973, Bert Dreyfus makes you feel like studying Heidegger is the most important thing you can be doing with your life. Another aspect of Bert's humility is that he was absolutely open to changing his position if he or a student recognized its weaknesses. And all of this would be enacted, as I'm sure many of you remember. I remember being in 155 Dwinell. There were 300 students in the class. Bert was behind the lectern. And he would just stand there like this and like kind of scrunch up his face and put his chin in his hand, just thinking about a question. And the entire room would be completely silent. Or he would pace back and forth across the stage. And he would come to a conclusion on Tuesday and begin class on Thursday with the announcement that he had been completely wrong and we needed to rethink the whole issue. To be absolutely committed to getting it right and at the same time to be open to the idea that you've gotten it completely wrong is an ideal I think many of us have tried to honor, even if more in the breach than in the observance. When I became Bert's graduate student, I experienced another level of his devotion to his students. A friend of mine recently said to me, Bert believed in you at a time when you really needed that. I think many of us in this room experienced Bert's devotion to us. That devotion was especially meaningful because, as we all know, Bert was not uncritical. He was famously direct, and he had no reservations about telling you when he thought you were wrong about something. But his criticism was never personal. He knew you could do better, and he never wavered in his belief that you could. And I can't think of a greater gift from a teacher to a student. Just as Bert was able to let go of an idea when he came to the conclusion that it was wrong, he could let go of his ambitions for his students in an absolutely generous way. About 3 years into my academic career, I realized that whenever our reading group of junior faculty met, everybody else was interested in talking about the books, and I was interested in talking about the other people in the department. I decided to become a clinical psychologist. I was really anxious the day that I was going to meet Bert to tell him that I was leaving academics. I had already told one of my teachers, whose response was, shall we say, less than enthusiastic. But Bert was totally generous in his response. He was sad and disappointed, but he was totally supportive. Over the years, once I had my own clinical practice, he sent me students whom he thought might be able to use my help. He and I continued to have a friendship for the next 30 years. And again, it was a lesson to me about all relationships that I probably honored more when I reached them in the observance, which is the importance of staying true to the people we love, even when they make decisions that we wouldn't have made for them. Mark and Sean will talk about being Bert's student and colleague, and Stefan and Gabrielle will talk about Bert as a parent. I want to conclude with a quote from the Talmud that I gave to Bert at his 70th birthday party in this room. I included it in the note that I wrote to him. And it sums up what he meant and will always mean to me. The rabbis are asking a typical rabbinic question, which is, if your father loses something and your teacher loses something, whose object should you go look for first? And the answer is your teacher. And the reasoning they give is, his teachers takes precedence because his father brought him into this world, but his teacher, who taught him wisdom, brings him to live in the world to come.